Yo, 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 what is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and in today's video, we are going to be talking about this community uproar major topic of migration, credit accumulation, and restriction of player movement, and how this is impacting the game in a bigger way than maybe even the developers think. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us up, because it helps out a lot. So first and foremost, if you are someone who is dealing with a situation right now that revolves around migration, whether you're an individual player, a group of players, a full alliance, and the situation you are in is really just frustrating to you and might be unbelievable and may not make any sense. And if you are someone who's contemplating lowering activity, lowering spending, stopping spending, not playing the game anymore because of these situations, I would love to hear from you. Tell us your situation. How did it come about? How did it get to where it is? And what are you thinking are your only options right now? Let us know in the comments down below. So let's dive in first, and we're going to lay some groundwork here first and foremost, as always. So what is actually happening? So let's start. This really stemmed from an in-game mail, and we're going to go to our saved, right? So if we go to the V1.0.30 Depths of Winter, and we go down to 6-3, it says fixed an issue where players could gain over 20,000 member points per day for building alliance building in certain circumstances. Now, this, from what I'm hearing, is basically like the slow building concept in Rock, where you basically take like one unit in a legion and you send it out to a flag or something to build that you can earn credits from, alliance credits from, and then you just let that accumulate. And this was one of, from what I understand, is one of the main ways that you were able to basically get a lot of credits. Some people were, I think some estimates I saw were like around 4,000 or plus 400,000 a day that they were able to get. And clearly with this change happening, we're going to show you some of the math that a fellow creator put out as well, and we're going to give a shout out here in a moment. But this is kind of where this is stemming from, essentially. And so you can get 400K, right? So, or excuse me, 400 credits is how much it costs per day, right? So we can show you some of the numbers here. So you go in, you get a week, right? So one permit a week, it costs 400K credits. Now, we ended up hearing this from CoD CS, and we're going to show you this screenshot here. And so this says, member points can be obtained through Alliance Tech donations, Behemoth training, Alliance helps, and buildings. There is no upper limit on the member points that can be obtained. Right, so this was stated, I think, a couple months ago from CoD CS. We get to our next screenshot, and I want to give a shout out to Nuth here, or Nuth, if that's how it's pronunciated, because he, or I will say they, gotta keep these things gender neutral, did some math for us, and we always appreciate when BN's on having to always do the data, so thank you guys so much. So this is about 1.0.30 patch. If I understand correctly, the item 6.3, which is what we referenced from the patch notes for 0.30, from now on, players will only gain 20K member points per day from building. We must keep in mind that players should be able to acquire at least 400K member points weekly. If we consider the following member points, so here's the math. 140K from building, 20K is the daily cap, 70K from helps, 10K is the daily cap, 33.6K from donating tech, 24 nations a day and no crit, and 33.6K from donating to Behemoths, which is 24 nations a day, and again, no crit hits, right, for singles, right? So not if you see like the ×2 or the ×3, but just a ×1. You get estimated 277.2K, right, or 277,200 member points a week. Obviously, that falls short of being able to reach 400K member points a week in order for you to get your one permit a week, which I effortlessly agree with. Like, it's not even close. That should be the bare minimum operating standard. Now, if you want to create other ways for people to go and accumulate member points, you want to raise the amount of points that you can get from the current available means of accumulating credits, totally fine, however you go about it. But as long as that number equals 400K at minimum every week is what it should. Now, I would even argue it maybe should go a little bit over that. So that way you have a little bit of cushion there, right? So people that aren't having to 100% over 100% clear and no life in will still be able to get the 400K if they're maybe able to do 90% participation, right? Or contributions throughout the week. So you're not demanding absolute perfection from everyone, which is exactly what you would be doing if you made it 400K, which in my opinion is still unrealistic, right? I would say something like maybe 450K you could get for the week if you do everything. So you have a little bit of cushion there, right? And again, maybe it's 425, 430, 450, but you get my point. And so if the donation to Tech and Behemoth crit to ×2, then we are still talking about 310,800 weekly credits that you can get, which again, you still fall short around 90K. Not to mention that older servers have problems donating helps and processes requiring being online. Please review the member point system. I already warned multiple times about CoD repeating the same error from Rock and forcing players to grind merits. Again, this, I think, is just incredibly well put. And again, shout out to Nuth or Neth for putting this together. This really hammers home at the point of that this is really kind of where these things are stemming from. And obviously with the now 20K fix, right, as they said, this is, I believe, going to become an incredible major problem, and it's going to factor into more negative feelings and negative emotions and feedback than I would say once this goes live. It probably is already generating, but it's not going to become real, I think, until you see the patch go live, I believe, on the 13th, right? So it's in a couple days from now. Now, getting to, I did ask a couple people about this for free-to-play. My buddy Deremy or Just Kill Him, I had asked him, a few others as well, about, what do they think some of the averages really would be for something like this, right? And they were saying probably around 200K a week. Seems kind of realistic-ish on like middle high, maybe high end, because you have to think about this. Tech donations, right? So you need to do, let's do this, right? So let's assume that you're not going to be perfect on tech donations. Right, you're not going to be doing you're not going to hit 24 out of 24 all the time. Now, obviously, the trick there is you should really stay at 23, right? You should never max it out, right? In this case, where it's not 24 out of 24, right? But it's 10 out of 10, right? You always want to stay at 9 out of 10, so you have some cushion, and then you zero out before you go to bed. Behemoth training, kind of a similar thing. Alliance helps, right? That obviously is based on activity, and so once again, the assumption is that you should not anticipate you're going to be perfect on those things. It would be cool if someone did some math on that, though, to see how many total helps you have to hit, and then like what's the average amount of helps that are maybe coming through for like a top alliance per hour, right? That would actually be pretty cool if someone did the math on that. And if you do, I may pin that or add that in the pin and give you some credit. So if you do that, ping me and let me know. Then you have the alliance buildings, right? So again, you have the tech donations, Behemoth training, alliance helps, and alliance buildings. Now, hitting the 20K building, I would imagine, is probably going to be a little easier overall, having a higher percentage of doing that than probably the other three, because you just kind of send that off, you let it run, and then you go ahead and have it come back, right? Even if you're doing a slow build and you hit your 20K cap, then you bring it back, right? It's not something that you have to consistently maintain. It's kind of a one and done thing that you send out. You just have to remember to recall, or it'll recall automatically right once the building is done. So now let's transition here to what are the instructions for acquiring permits, right? So we can really lay this groundwork even further. So let's go back into our save mails. We're going to go here to instructions for acquiring permits, right? Because what are the levels here? How long does it actually take? So at the low end, you have 10 mil and below is one migration permit, right? So that's 1 week. However, if we're going off of the data that we just showed for how long it's probably going to take, right, which again, if we do a conservative estimate, or we could say kind of a middle groundish estimate, let's just say it's 200K, right, based on the 277, you lower that a little bit because you're not going to be perfect. You just let's average 200K. So we do that, and that means that it's going to take you 2 weeks, right? So you basically have to double everything to an extent, right? So instead of 1 week to hit one migration permit for 10 mil and below, it would take you 2 weeks to do that. If we go to 2 migration permits, well, instead of 2 weeks, now it's 4 weeks or a month. If you look at 3, now it's a month and a half. You look at 5, okay, now you're looking at 10 weeks, right? That's 2.5 months. You look at 7 permits that you need for 40 to 50 mil, right? So basically 7 for 40, what is it, 40 mil, and then it's probably hits, or if it's exactly, it's probably 40 mil and 1, right, up to 50 mil. But now you're talking 14 that you need. And what's that, 3.5 months, right, just to get those that it's going to take you. Then if we talk about the high end, right, and really we're talking about this from more of a bare minimum free-to-play perspective, there are some people that are at the top of the free-to-play list. And just to name a few people here as well, I think if I'm showing this to you guys, oh, am I not here? So we'll just show you a couple people here. And this is, again, I'm going to update this for this month. But as of about 2 months ago, like you see Captain Snowball here, 75 mil, Ragnar Siggy, right here, 68, 66. So, I mean, those three are probably a little bit closer, at least those two, Ragnar and Siggy, closer to the 70 mil, but it's kind of showing you some of the averages. Like, they're probably at 70 fully healed, I would imagine by now, as it's been about 2 months. And so you probably have around 3, depending on what Mars and Gotrek were able to do, maybe Dre as well, pushing up. You have people that are getting to around that 70 mil threshold more and more and more. And so let's say you're at 70 mil. Okay, well, if that's the case, then you need 30. And with that in mind, we're talking 30 permits, but you're going to have to double that. And let's just say conservatively it's going to be 60. 30 weeks for 30 permits will take you 7 months and 2 weeks. You double that, that's 14, 15 months. That's a year and 3 months it's going to take for you. And that's for the high end. Again, you can imagine that probably more of the middle of the pack is going to be somewhere around like the 30 to 60, 30 to 50 more likely, right, for free to play, given how long some of these people have been playing from. And some of those people at the top of the boards have been playing for, around 2 years plus, or close to that, right? A year and a half, 2 years, give or take. And that's just an obscenely long time to move. Now, yes, there are a couple ways of looking at this, and we will talk about that in a moment. But the fact is that it just takes a long time, and I believe it's incredibly too long. And it takes too long to get permits. It takes too long to grind for the member points. And this is where we're going to then talk and transition a little bit here. So for cooldowns, right, to migrate, you have a 90-day cooldown. If you migrate to a kingdom and then you want to leave that kingdom and go somewhere else, what this means is that you are stuck there for 2 seasons minimum. And that's only if you are able to get the amount of permits that you need in order to move again. If you're free to play, kick rocks, pimpin'. I mean, unless you are lower power and you're going to fall into, maybe if you're around that 20 to 30, right around there, maybe up to 40, because if it's 5 weeks and you're going 10, you're thinking 2.5 months at that point. Okay, maybe, right, because you're still within that kind of 3-month window. So maybe if you're like below 40 mil, you probably have a higher chance of being able to move within the 2-month window. But if you're above 40 mil and you're free to play, you start, and as you get higher in power, you start to have a higher percentage chance of being stuck there for now 3 seasons potentially. And I just have to imagine that that's not a bright look, especially for players that are in situations that they don't want to be in. And so now I'm going to show you a couple more screenshots here that we were able to pull that just kind of goes into some of what I think are really the big topic pieces here at the end that we're going to touch on. So let's move on, and we'll go over here to a screenshot that was taken from the COD Help channel, where COD CS has responded that the target server does not have a high king. Your power needs to be below the season migration power limit to be able to migrate to that server. So if you're wondering what that means, let's go in and we'll give you a show here. So we'll go to rules. Season migration power limit is going to be, hang on, I think it's here in server status. Yes. So the power limits are as, hang on. No. It should have said it here in quotation somewhere. Here we go. If your power is below the season default, which is season 1, 3 mil, season 2, 5 mil, pre-strike 10 mil, season of strike 15 mil, that means that if you are below that power, you can migrate into those kingdoms without having to go through standard migration. Which is where the king would have had to raise the power, right? Because this is what it defaults to if there is no king. Meaning that you wouldn't be able to join anyways, right? Unless a king got there and they were able to raise the power. And so this can be incredibly deadly, and we will talk about that in a moment. So then let's go over to our next one, which is funny because I actually ended up taking the screenshot of this anyways. So someone had replied here, COD Chick, but please, you realize how extremely low 3 million power is? It's T1, T2 players, even farms higher than 3 mil. If most players protect players from T2 troops, doesn't make any sense. It just looks like a servers without king locked. 0 power or 3 million is no difference. If no one is able to migrate to servers without a king, then those servers never be able to take kings. So please be clear about what is the real plan for servers without kings, since those servers completely blocked from anyone to migrate there. And if you're in a kingdom that, let's just say, is somewhat active-ish and you don't have a king there, I would really love to hear what your experience is and how you guys feel about that. You're not going to be able to get people over a certain power threshold. Does that... And especially if you like where you're playing, and yeah, maybe there's not a lot, or hey, maybe you want to leave and you want to migrate out, but maybe it's just going to end up taking you a lot longer than the 200K average, because we're talking about being able to make those situations, right, when you are essentially in a kingdom that has activity. right? If you're in a kingdom that doesn't have a lot of activity, then like, let's just say you don't have a full alliance worth of activity, or maybe 50, maybe 175 players, 100 players, something like that, or more, that are truly active, where you're going to be able to hit these averages, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. Like, your alliance has to be active enough to hit some of these averages that Nuth was doing the math on. And if you fall below probably what a minimum average is of activity, then the average amount of credits you can get starts to get lower and lower and lower. And it just will take you that much longer eventually to get those permits and to be able to migrate out. And so, right, they asked us, right, what's the reason you want those servers locked for migration? And then obviously we kind of show you off this. So now let's get to what I think are just some of the meats of this whole thing that we've basically set up for you up until this point. So number one, if you don't have a king in your kingdom, you can't really grow as far as being able to resurge, revive the kingdom, improve its power, improve its overall activity, because you'd have to be able to get kingdom players, and eventually, as your season progresses, you'll be able to get people up to 15 mil. But what is that really, right? It's not a high power. It's not a lot. And we're not saying that they need to be able to get people that are 100 mil whales coming in. But 15 mil isn't really a lot to do almost anything with. And as alluded to, and I'm sure a number of people out there, I mean, there's farms and second accounts that are around that power level, right? If you've been playing for a while or you're active, and obviously that's aside from people that may spend. And so then you get to number two, which is, like we alluded to, it takes too long to farm credits to get permits. Personally, I do not see the point of them having this weekly limit on the amount of permits that you can buy. My view on it is that you should just be able to buy as many permits as you want if you have the credits to do so. There's no point in having a time limit on it because you already have a 90-day cooldown. And don't worry, we're going to get to that in a moment. So I don't see what the justification is. I don't see what the great explanation is there on why it is that you have to have this weekly limit to get creds. Just make it available, remove the weekly limit, allow people, or even just say, like, allow people to buy one a day. Like, if you're just, again, I don't see what the reason is. Like, I don't see any kind of overwhelmingly just hard justifiable fact and explanation that's going to make me change my mind on something that is just so erroneous out there or egregious that I'm just missing it entirely. I don't know. I'm not seeing it. So for me, am I okay with them going like to buying them once a day? Absolutely. Would I rather them just allow for you to buy, 10 in one day and however many you want as long as you have the credits to do so? Yes, that's the way I think it should be. I don't see a reason why there isn't. If someone has an argument, again, I'd love to hear it. Aside from that, let's go to, it takes too long to accumulate permits. Right. Well, I guess it's kind of the same thing, right? It accumulates permits, but really it takes too long to farm credits. We already kind of mentioned how they should be able to hit that minimum before. The next one here is that players may want to get out of bad situations, right? What happens if you're in a kingdom and you've been playing there for a while and all of a sudden things are changing, you just don't necessarily like the direction, maybe the kingdom isn't the right fit for you, you want to get out. Or let's say you've migrated into a kingdom and you thought the kingdom was going to be one way, it turned out it wasn't, or maybe it was, but then something happened, it really wasn't their fault, and now it just ends up being something else. Whatever the fact may be, and whatever spectrum you fall in there for reasonings that, for situations that have played out, and end up being something that is not aligned with what you wanted when you migrated there, whether as an individual, a group of players, full alliances, etc., you now want to get out. You're stuck. You can't do anything for at least 2 seasons. And I have to believe that that can have a major psychological impact onto players and can dwindle motivation and potentially cause some people just to stop playing, lowering spending, lowering activity. I can tell you, if I migrated somewhere and I believed that I was going to a place that I felt this was going to be my new home, and it ended up, for whatever reason, whether that's controllable or uncontrollable, that did not line up with what my expectations were and promises that were made when I was going in, I mean, yeah, I may consider just not really playing and just doing bare minimum activity until I can get out, let alone depending on how, and it also depends on how I feel about the game overall. If I'm in a good state of mind with the game, then yeah, I may consider doing that, but I would just lower spending, maybe lower activity. If I'm not in a good place, then who knows, maybe it'd be worse than that. And it is curious to me on where people kind of fall under that, because I've heard kind of everything under the sun on how players may take it. And so that's why I definitely want to hear from you guys. So let us know down there. Then the next one is players migrate. The next one we'll say is, once you get to this point of you understand how the system works, there really isn't anything in my view that really should stop people from migrating season to season. If anything, the cooldown is more negatively impacting towards players because they don't want to be stuck in bad situations. And as long as you eventually, hopefully they will, make the gating process fully gated for kingdoms where every player has to get accepted and denied, even though for the most part you're still able to do that, right? As you just lower it, then you have to raise it and lower it and raise it. But it would just be nice if everyone had to apply who was above that default season minimum. In those situations, when you think about that you have to be stuck there, I just don't see the reason why the cooldown is that long, right? If anything, you're helping people getting out of situations that, because think of it like this. You go into a kingdom, it's a trial basis. Even if you think this is going to be your new home, it's the same thing that I tell people when you're trying to recruit officers to your alliance, right? You do this on a probationary basis. You don't fully commit and say, oh yeah, hey, you're here forever. No, you set appropriate expectations, right? If you've never worked with an officer before or someone before in an officer capacity, regardless of if they have glowing recommendations and references and people that you know that worked with them before, fantastic. You always treat it on a probationary period because you don't know what their expectations are. They don't know exactly what your expectations are. And I'm talking about once things are actually in motion and they've gone into the position, you need to see if things are going to work out for both of you. Is it a right fit for you? Is it a right fit for them? It's the same thing when you're migrating somewhere and you've had expectations set for you. Even if you understand why you're going to migrate somewhere and what that kingdom is offering, and especially if you're the kingdom and you know what you're offering and you have an expectation of the player, it's the same thing. You need to make sure it's a right fit for you. So being able to play that kingdom out for a season and then figure out, okay, this is the right fit, let's give it another season. Or you know what, it's not really exactly what I thought it was going to be, I need to get out. The fact that you're denying people the opportunity to do that and you're forcing them to play 2 or more seasons, it just... That part doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you need to allow a level of fluidity to be in the game so people can get out of situations that they don't want to be in. And it just sucks that this game system is basically telling you no. So yeah, that basically sums it up for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Like I said, I want to hear your situations. I want to hear what you have to say. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments down below. Hopefully you enjoyed this take, and we'll see what ends up happening. That's going to do it for me. As always, until next time, we'll catch you later.